Dracula, Chapter 20. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 1st of October, evening. I found Thomas Snelling in his house at Bethan Green, but unhappily he was not in a condition to remember anything. The very prospect of beer which my expected coming had opened to him had proved too much, and he had begun too early upon his expected debauch. I learned, however, from his wife, who seemed a decent poor soul, that he was only the assistant to Smollett, who of the two mates was the responsible person. So off I drove to Walworth, and found Mr. Joseph Smollett at home and in his shirt-sleeves, taking a late tea out of a saucer. He is a decent, intelligent fellow, distinctly a good, reliable type of workman, and with a headpiece of his own. He remembered all about the incident of the boxes, and from a wonderful dog-eared notebook, which he produced from some mysterious receptacle about the seat of his trousers, and which had hieroglyphical entries in thick, half-obliterated pencil. He gave me the destination of the boxes. They were, he said, 6 in the carload, which he took from Carfax, and left at 197 Chickson Street, Mile End, Newton, and another 6 which he deposited in Jamaica Lane, Bermondsey. If then the Count meant to scatter these ghastly refuges of his over London, these places were chosen as the first delivery, so that later he might distribute more fully. The systematic manner in which this was done made me think that he could not mean to confine himself to just 2 sides of London. He was now fixed on the far east of the northern shore, on the east of the southern shore, and on the south. The north and west were surely never meant to be left out of his diabolical scheme, let alone the city itself, and the very heart of fashionable London in the south-west and west. I went back to Smollett, and asked him if he could tell us of any other boxes which had been taken from Carfax. He replied, "Well, governor, you treated me very handsome. I had given him half a sovereign. And I tell you all I know. I heard a man by the name of Bloxham say 4 nights ago, in the Hare and Hounds on Pencher's Alley, as he and his mate had a rare dusty job in an old house at Purfey. There ain't a many such jobs as this here, and I think that maybe Sam Bloxham could tell you somewhat." I asked if he could tell me where to find him, and I told him that if he could get me the address it would be worth another half-sovereign. He gulped down the rest of his tea and stood up, saying that he was going to begin the search then and there, and at the door he stopped and said, "But look here, governor, there ain't no sense in me a-keeping you here. I might find Sam soon, or I might, but anyhow he ain't like to be in a way to tell you much tonight. Sam's a rare one when he starts on the booze. If you can give me an envelope with a stamp upon it, and put your address in it, I'll find out where Sam is to be found and post it to you tonight. But you better be arter him soon in the morning, or maybe you won't catch him. Sam gets off main early, never mind the booze the night before." This was all quite practical, so one of the children went off with a penny to buy an envelope and a sheet of paper, and to keep the change. When she came back, I addressed the envelope and stamped it, and when Smollett had again faithfully promised to post the address when found, I took my way to home. We're on the track anyhow. I'm tired tonight, and I want to sleep. Mina is fast asleep, and looks a little pale. Her eyes look as if she had been crying. Poor dear. I've no doubt it frets her to be kept in the dark, and it may make her doubly anxious about me and the others, but it is best as is. It is better to be disappointed and worried in such a way now than to have all nerve broken. The doctors were quite right to insist on her being kept out of this dreadful business. I must be firm, for on me this particular burden of silence must rest. I shall not ever enter on the subject with her under any circumstance. Indeed, it may not be a hard task after all, for she herself has become reticent on the subject, and has not spoken of the Count or his doings ever since we told her of our decision. 2nd of October, evening. A long and trying and exciting day. By the first post I got my directed envelope with a dirty scrap of paper enclosed, on which was written with a carpenter's pencil in a sprawling hand, "Sam Bloxham, Cochrane's, 4 Porter's Court, Bartle Street, Walworth. Ask for the despite." I got the letter in bed, and rose without waking Mina. She looked heavy and sleepy and pale, and far from well. I determined not to wake her, but that when I should return from this new search, I would arrange for her going back to Exeter. I think she would be happier in our own home, with her daily tasks to interest her, than in being here amongst us and deep in ignorance. I only saw Dr. Seward for a moment, and I told him where I was off to, promising to come back and tell the rest as soon as I should have found out anything. I drove to Walworth and found, with some difficulty, Potter's Court. Mr. Smollet's spelling misled me, as I asked for Potter's Court instead of Potter's Court. However, when I found the court, I had no difficulty in discovering Cocaine's lodging-house. When I asked the man who came to the door for the depite, he shook his head and said, "I don't know him. There ain't no such a person here. Never heard of him in all me bloomin' days. Don't believe there ain't nobody of that kind living here anywhere." I took out Smollet's letter, and as I read at it, it seemed to me the lesson of the spelling of the name of the court might guide me. "What are you?" I asked. "I'm the deputy," he answered. I saw at once that I was on the right track. Phonetic spelling had again misled me. A half-crown tip with the deputy's knowledge at my disposal, and I learned that Mr. Bloxham, who had slept off the remains of his beer on the previous night at Cocaine's, had left for his work at Popular at 5 o'clock that morning. He could not tell me where the place of work was situated, but he had a vague idea that it was some kind of new-fangled warehouse, and with this slender clue I had to start for Popular. It was 12 o'clock before I got any satisfactory hint of such a building, and this I got at a coffee shop, where some workmen were having their dinner. One of these suggested that there was being erected at Cross Angel Street a new cold storage building, and as this suited the condition of a new-fangled warehouse, I once drove to it. An interview with a surly gatekeeper and a surlier foreman, both of whom were appeased with the coin of the realm, put me upon the track of Bloxham. He was sent for on my suggestion that I was willing to pay his day's wages to his foreman for the privilege of asking him a few questions on a private matter. He was a smart enough fellow, though rough of speech and bearing, and when I had promised to pay for his information and give him an earnest, he told me that he had made 2 journeys between Carfax and a house in Piccadilly, and he had taken from this house the latter 9 great boxes, main heavy ones, with a horse and cart hired by him for this purpose. I asked if he could tell me the number of the house in Piccadilly, to which he replied, "Well, governor, I forgets the number, but it was only a few doors from a big white church or something of the kind. Not long built, it was a dusty old house, though nothing of the dustiness of the house we took the bloomin' boxes from." "And how did you get into the house if they were both empty?" "There was the old party which engaged me awaiting in the house of Purfleet. He helped me to lift the boxes and put them in the dray. Curse me, but he was the strongest chap I ever struck, and him an old fella with a white moustache, one that thin you would think he couldn't throw a shadow." Oh, how this phrase thrilled through me. "Why, he took up his end of the box like there was pounds of tea, and me a puffin' and a blowin' afore I could upend mine anyhow, and I'm no chicken either." "How did you get into the house in Piccadilly?" I asked. "Oh, he was there too. He must have started off and got there for me. For when I rung of the bell, he came and opened the door himself, and helped me to carry the boxes into the hall." "The whole 9, I asked.
"Oh, yeah, there was 5 in the first load and 4 in the second. It was main dry work, and I don't so well remember how we got home. I interrupted him."
"Were the boxes left in the hall?"
"Oh, yeah, it was a big hole, and there was nothing else in it."
I made one more attempt to further matters. "You did not have any key?"
"No, never used no key nor nothink. The old gent, he opened the door himself, and shut again when I drove off. I don't remember the last time, but that was the beer."
"And you can't remember the numbers of the house?"
"No, sir, but you needn't have no difficulty about that. It's iron with a stone front with a bow on it, and high steps to the door. I know them steps, having had to carry the boxes up with 3 loafers, which came round to earn a copper. The old gent gave them shillings, and they seen they got so much they wanted more, but he took one of 'em by the shoulder, and was like to throw him down the steps, till the lot of 'em went away cussing."
I thought that with this description I could find the house, so having paid my friend for his information, I started off for Piccadilly. I had gained a new painful experience. The Count could, it was evident, handle the earth boxes himself. If so, time was indeed precious, for now that he had achieved a certain amount of distribution, he could, by choosing his own time, complete the task unobserved. At Piccadilly Circus I discharged my cab, and walked westward beyond the Journal Constitutional. I came across the house described, and was satisfied that this was next to the lairs arranged by Dracula. The house looked as though it had been long untenanted. The windows were encrusted with dust, the shutters up, and all the framework was black with time, and from the iron the paint had mostly scaled away. It was evident that up to lately there had been a large notice board in front of the balcony. It had, however, been roughly torn away, the uprights which had supported it still remaining. Behind the rails of the balcony I saw there were some loose boards, whose raw edges looked white. I would have given a good deal to have been able to see the notice board intact, as it would perhaps have given some clue to the ownership of the house. I remembered my experience of the investigation and purchase of Carfax, and I could not but feel that if I could find the former owner, there might be some means discovered of gaining an access to the home. There was at present nothing to be learned from the Piccadilly side, and nothing could be done, so I went round to the back to see if anything could be gathered from this quarter. The mews were active, the Piccadilly houses being mostly in occupation, and I asked one or two of the grooms and helpers whom I saw round if they could tell me anything about the empty home. One of them said that he heard it had lately been taken, but he couldn't say from whom. He told me, however, that up to lately there had been a notice board of for sale up, that perhaps Michel, Sons and Candy, the house agents, could tell me of something, as he thought he remembered seeing the name of that firm upon the board. I did not wish to seem too eager, or to let my informant know or guess too much, so I thanked him in the usual manner, and strolled away. It was now growing dusk, and the autumn night was closing in, so I did not lose upon any time. Having learned the address of Michel, Sons and Candy from a director at the Berkeley, I was soon at their office in Sackville Street. The gentleman who saw me was particularly suave in manner, but uncommunicative in equal portion, having once told me that the Piccadilly home, which throughout our interview he called a mansion, was sold. He considered my business as concluded, and when I asked who had purchased it, he opened his eyes a little wider, and paused a few seconds before replying, "It is so, sir." "Pardon me," I said with equal politeness, "but I have a special reason for wishing to know who purchased it." Again he paused longer. He raised his eyebrows farthermore. "It is sold, sir," again was his laconic reply. "Surely," I said, "you do not mind letting me know so much?" "Oh, but I do mind," he answered. "The affairs of their clients are absolutely safe in the hands of Michel, Sons and Candy." It was manifestly a prig of the first waiter, and there was no use arguing with him. I thought I had best meet him on his own ground, so I spoke. "Your clients, sir, are happy in having so resolute a guardian of their confidence, for I am myself a professional man, and here I handed him my card. In this instance I am not prompted by simple curiosity. I act on the part of Lord Godalming, who wishes to know something of the property which was, he understood, lately for sale." These words put a different complexion upon affairs, and he spoke. "Oh, I would like to oblige you if I could, Mr. Harker, and especially I would like to oblige his lordship. We once carried out a small matter of renting some chambers for him when he was the Honourable Arthur Holmwood. If you would let me have his lordship's address, I will consult the house upon the subject, and will in any case communicate with his lordship by tonight's post. It will be a pleasure if we can so far deviate from our rules as to give the required information to his lordship." I wanted to secure a friend, and not to make an enemy, so I thanked him, and I gave the address to Dr. Seward's, and came away. It was now dark, and I was tired and hungry. I got a cup of tea at the Accurated Bread Company, and came down to Purfleet by the next train. I found all the others at home. Mina was looking quite tired and pale, but she made a gallant effort to be bright and cheerful. It wrung my heart to think that I had to keep anything from her, and so caused her ingratitud. Thank God this will be the last night of her looking on at our conferences and feeling the sting of our not showing our confidence. It took all of my courage to hold to the wise resolution of keeping her out of our grim task. She seems somehow more reconciled, or else the very subject seems to have become repugnant to her, for when any accidental allusion is made, she actually shudders. I am glad we met our resolution in time, as with such a feeling as this, our growing knowledge would be torture to her. I could not tell the others of the day's discovery till we were alone, so after dinner, followed by a little music, to save appearances even amongst ourselves, I took Mina to her room and left her to go to sleep. The dear girl was more affectionate with me than ever, and clung to me as though she would detain me, but there was much to be talked of, and I did come away. Thank God the ceasing of telling things had made no difference between us. When I came down again, I found the others all gathered around the fire in the study. In the train I had written my diary so far, and simply read it off to them as the best means of letting them get at least of my own information. When I had finished, Van Helsing spoke. "This has been a great day's work, friend Jonathan. Doubtless we are on the track of the missing boxes. If we found them all in that house, when our work is near the end. But if there be some missing, we must search until we find them. Then shall we make our final coup, and hunt the wretch to his real death." We all sat silently ahead, and at once Mr. Morse spoke. "Say, how are we going to get into that house?" "We got into the other," answered Lord Godalming quickly. "But, Art, this is different. We broke house at Carfax, but we had night and a walled park to protect us. It'll be mighty different thing to commit burglary in Piccadilly, either by day or night. I confess I don't see how we're going to get in unless that agency duck can find us a key of some sort. Perhaps we shall know when we get his letter upon the morning." Lord Godalming's brows contracted. He stood up and walked about the room. By and by he stopped and said, turning from one to another of us, "Quincy's head is level. This burglary business is getting serious. We got off once all right, but we have now a rare job on hand, unless we can find the Count's key basket." As nothing could well be done before morning, and as it would be at best advisable to wait till Lord Godalming should hear from his sheriffs, we decided not to take any active step before breakfast. For a good while we sat and smoked, discussing the matter in the various lights and bearings. I took the opportunity of bringing this diary right up to the moment, and very sleepy shall go to bed. Just a line. Mina sleeps soundly. Her breathing is regular. Her forehead is puckered up into little wrinkles, as though she thinks even upon her sleep. She is still much too pale, but does not look so haggard as she did this morning. Tomorrow will, I hope, mend all this, for she will be herself at home next her. Oh, but dear, how sleepy I am. Dr. Seward's Diary, 1st of October. I am puzzled about Renfield. His mood changes so rapidly that I find it difficult to keep touch of them, and as they always mean something more than his own well-being, they form a more than interesting study. This morning, when I went to see him after his repulse of Van Helsing, his manner was that of a man commanding destiny. He was, in fact, commanding destiny, subjectively. He did not really care for any of the things of mere earth, for he was in the clouds, and looked down on all of the weaknesses and wants of us poor mortals. I thought I would improve the occasion and learn something, so I asked him, "What about the flies these times?" He smiled upon me in quite a superior sort of way. Such a smile would have become the face of Malvello. Then he answered me, "What about the flies these times?" He smiled on me in quite... The fly, my dear sir, has one striking feature. Its wings are typical of the aerial powers of the faculties. The ancients did well when they typified the soul as a butterfly. I thought I would push this analogue to its utmost logically,
So I spoke. "Oh, it is a soul you are after now, is it?" His madness foiled his reason, and a puzzled look spread over his face as, shaking from his head, with a decision which I had but seldom seen in him, he spoke. "Oh no, oh no. I want no souls. Life is what I want." Here he brightened up. "I'm pretty indifferent about it at present. Life's all right. I have all I want. We must get a new patient, doctor, if you wish to study zoophagy." This puzzled me a little, so I drew him on. "Oh, then you command life? Are you a god, I suppose?" He smiled with an ineffable benign superiority. "Oh no, far be it from me to aggregate to myself the attributes of deity. I'm not even concerned in his especially spiritual doings. If I may state my intellectual position, I am, so far as concerns things purely terrestrial, somewhat in the position which Enoch occupied of spirituality." This was a poser to me. I could not at the moment recall Enoch's apostosis, as I had to ask a simple question, though I felt that by doing so I was lowering myself in the eyes of this lunatic. "And why with Enoch?" "Oh, because he walked with God." I could not see the analogy, but did not like to admit it, so I harked back to what he had denied. "So you don't care about life, and you don't want souls. Why not?" I put my question quickly and somewhat sternly, on purpose to disconcert him. The effort did succeed. For an instant he unconsciously relapsed into his old servile manner, bent low before me, and actually fawned upon me as he replied. "I don't want any souls, indeed I don't. I couldn't use them if I had them. They'd be no manner use to me. I couldn't eat them or—" He suddenly stopped, and an old cunning look spread over his face, like a wind swept on the surface of the water. "Doctor, so to life. What is it after all? When you got all you require, and you know that you never want, that is all. I have friends, good friends, like you, Dr. Seward." This was said with a leer of inexpressive cunning. "I know that I shall never lack the means of life." I think that through the cloudiness of his insanity, he saw some antagonism in me, for he once fell back on the last refuge of such as he, dogged silence. After a short time I saw that for the present it was useless to speak upon him. He was sulky, so I came away. Late in the day he sent for me. Ordinarily I would not have come without special reason, but just at present I am so interested in him that I would gladly make an effort. Besides, I am glad to have anything to help pass the time. Harker is out, following up clues. So are Lord Godalming and Quincy, and Van Helsing sits upon my study, poring over the records prepared by the Harkers. He seems to think that by accurate knowledge of all the details, he will light upon some new clue. He does not wish to be disturbed in his work without cause. I would have taken him with me to see the patient, only I thought that after his last repulse, he might not care to go again. There's also another reason. Renfield might not speak so freely before a third person as when he and I were alone. I found him sitting out in the middle of the floor upon a stool, a pose which is generally indicative of some mental energy upon his part. When I came in, he spoke at once, as though the question had been waiting upon his lips. "What about souls?" It was evident then that my surmise had been correct. Unconsciously, cerebration was doing its work, even within the lunatic. I determined to having the matter out. "What about them yourself?" I asked. He did not reply for a moment, but looked all around him, up and down, as though he expected to find some inspiration. "I don't want any souls," he said in a feeble, apologetic way. The matter seemed preying upon his mind. I determined to use it. Be cruel only to be kind. So I spoke. "You like life, and you want life." "Oh, yes. Well, that's all right. You needn't worry about that." "But," I asked, "how are we to get the life without getting the soul also?" This seemed to puzzle him, so I followed it up.
A nice time you'll have some time when you're flying out there, with the souls of thousands of flies and spiders and birds and cats buzzing and twittering and meowing all around you. You've got their lives, you know, and you must put up with their souls. Something seemed to affect his imagination, for he put his fingers to his ears and shut his eyes, screwing them up tightly, just as a small boy does when his face is being soaped. There was something pathetic in it that touched me. It also gave me a lesson, for it seemed that before me was a child, only a child. Though the features were dear worn, and the stubble on the jaw was indeed white, it was evident that he was undergoing some process of mental disturbance, and knowing how his past moods had interpreted things seemingly foreign to himself, I thought I would enter into his mind as well as I could, and go with him. The first step was to restore confidence, so I asked him, speaking loudly so that he could hear me through his closed ears, "Would you like some sugar to get your flies around again?" He seemed to wake up all at once, shaking his head. With a laugh he replied, "Not much. Flies are poor things, after all." After a pause he added, "But I don't want their souls buzzing round me all the time." "Or spiders," I went on. "Blow spiders. What's the use of spiders? There ain't anything in them to eat." He stopped suddenly, as though reminded of a forbidden topic. So, I thought to myself. This is the second time he has suddenly was stopped at the word drink. What does he mean? Renfield seemed himself aware of having made a lapse, for he hurried on, as though to distract my attention away from his mistake. "I don't take any stock in all such matters, rats and mice and such small deer, as Shakespeare has it. Chicken feed of the larder, they might be called. I'm past all that sort. You might as well ask a man to eat molecules with a pair of chopsticks, as to try to interest me about the lesser carnivoria, when I know of what is before me." "I see," I said. "You want big things that you can make your teeth in. How would you like to breakfast upon an elephant?" "Oh, what ridiculous nonsense you are talking." He was getting wide awake, so I thought I would press him hard. "I wonder," I said, "what an elephant's soul is like." The effect I desired was obtained, for he at once fell from his high horse and became a child again. "I don't want an elephant's soul, or any soul at all," he said. For a few moments he sat despondently. Suddenly he jumped to his feet, his eyes blazing, and all signs of intense cerebral excitement. "To hell with you and your souls," he shouted. "What are you plaguing me about souls? Haven't I got enough to worry and pain and distract me already, without thinking of souls?" He looked so hostile that I thought I was in for another homicidal fit. So I blew my whistle. The instant, however, I did so, he became calm and spoke apologetically. "Forgive me, doctor. I forgot myself. You do not need any help. I'm just so worried in my mind that I'm apt to be irritable. If you only knew the problem I have to face, and what I am working out, you would pity and tolerate and pardon me. Pray do not put me in a strait waistcoat. I want to think, and I cannot think freely when my body is so confined. I'm sure you understand." He evidently still had self-control, so when the attendants came, I told them not to mind, and they once more withdrew. Renfield watched them go, and when the door was closed, he spoke, with considerable dignity and sweetness. "Dr. Seward, you have been very considerate towards me. Believe me, I am very grateful to you." I thought it well to leave him in this mood, and so I stood up to go away. There's a certain something to ponder over in this man's state. Several points seem to make what the American interviewers call a story, if one could only get them within the proper order. Here they are. He will not mention drinking, fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything, and has no dread of wanting life upon the future. Despises the meaner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by their souls. Logically, all these things point one way.
He has assurance of some kind that he will acquire a higher life. He dreads the consequences, that burden of a soul, when it is human life he looks to. And the assurance? O merciful God, the Count has been to him, and there is no scheme of terror afoot. Later that same day, I went after my round to Van Helsing, and told him of my suspicion. He grew very thoughtful and grave, and after thinking the matter over for a while, asked me to take him to Renfield. I did so, and as we came to the door we heard the lunatic within singing gaily, as he used to do in the time which now seems so long ago. When we entered, we saw with amazement that he had spread out his sugar as of old. The flies, lethargic with the autumn, were beginning to buzz within his room. We tried to make him talk of the subject of our previous conversation, but he would not attend. He went on with his singing, just as though he had not been present. He had got a scrap of paper, and was folding it into a notebook. He had come away as ignorant as we went in. His was a curious case indeed, for we must watch him tonight.
Letter, Mitchell, Sons and Candy, to Lord Godalming, 1st of October. My lord, we are at all times only too happy to meet your wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of your lordship, expressed by Mr. Harker on your behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and purchase of number 347 Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executors of the late Archibald Winter Suffield. The purchasers are foreign noblemen, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase money in notes over the counter. If your lordship would pardon us as using so vulgar an expression, beyond this we know nothing whatever of him. We are, my lord, your lordship's humble servants, Mitchell, Sons and Candy. Dr. Seward's Diary, 2nd of October. I placed a man in the corridor last night, and told him to make an accurate note of any sound he might hear from Renfield's room. I gave him instructions also, that if he should be anything strange, he was to call me. After dinner, we had all gathered around the fire upon the study. Mrs. Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries upon the day. Harker was the only one who had any result, and we were in great hopes that his clue may be an important one. Before going to bed, I went around to the patient's rooms again, looking in through the observation trap. He was sleeping soundly, and his heart rose and fell with regular respiration. This morning the man on duty reported to me that a little after midnight he was restless, and kept saying his prayers somewhat loudly. I asked him if that was all, and he replied that it was all that he had heard. There was something about this manner so suspicious that I asked him point-blank if he had been asleep. He denied sleep, but admitted to having dozed for a moment. It is bad that the man cannot be trusted unless they are watched. Today Harker is out following up his clues, and Art and Quincy are looking after horses. Godalming thinks that it would be well to have horses always in readiness, for when we get the information which we seek, there will be no time to lose. We must sterilize all the imported earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count upon his weakness, and, without a refuge to fly to, Van Helsing is off to the British Museum, looking up some authorities on an ancient medicine. The old physicians took account of things which their followers do not accept, and the professor is searching for witch and demon cures, which may be useful to us as of the later. I sometimes think we must all be mad, and that we all shall wake again to sanity in strait waistcoats. Later that same day, we have met again. We seem at last to be upon the track, and our work of tomorrow may be the beginnings of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with us. His moods have so followed the doings of the Count that the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle way. If we could only get some hint as to what passed upon in his mind, between the time of my argument with him today and his resumption of his fly-catching, it might afford us a deep and valuable clue. He is now seemingly quiet for a spell. Where is he? That wild yell seemed to come from his room. The attendant came bursting into my room and told me that Renfield had somehow met with some accident. He had heard him yell, and when he went to find him lying upon his face on the floor, he was covered with blood. And I must go to him at once.